Sir, shall I start?
I'm okay. So whenever you're ready, and I think Dr. Dubey and Vinod, your choice when to start
मैडम ये
here.
स्टार्ट हुआ है, रुक जाओ अभी.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. We are delighted to have you for the 65th webinar in the Pratiti-2024 series, Becoming Aware, organized by Center of Excellence in Gaming and Simulation at Sri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, India. The topic of today's webinar is a systematic models-based perspective of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the resource person of the webinar is Mr. Jawahar Bhalla, Principal, JB Engineering Systems, Sydney, Australia. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and the University, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Jawahar Bhalla. On behalf of the University, to officially begin the session, before inviting our guest speaker, I would like to introduce him to the audience. Mr. Jawahar Bhalla is a passionate systems professional and president of INCO's Australian chapter, the Systems Engineering Society of Australia, SESA. He is a fellow of Engineers Australia with a BE in Aerospace Engineering, a BSc in Computer Science, and a Master's in Systems Engineering, and is currently PhD candidate working on a SE framework for the engineering and assurance of AI intensive systems. He has also served on the board of Simulation Australasia and was recognized in 2021 as the recipient of the Ray Page Lifetime Achievement Award for an outstanding contribution to the advancement of modeling and simulation in the Australasian region. So, without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Jawahar Bhalla to begin the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Rupali. Thank you. Can you hear me okay still? Okay,
Yes,
I'm going
sir.
to share screens. Thank you. Let me just get this. And I want to share sound as well. So, okay, is that coming through okay?
Yes,
Yep.
sir. It's
Excellent. Okay, so thank you. I have to cut back on that introduction. It was very long, so it was very good. Thank you. So here I'm going to, I think you already know the topic, so I'll just get stuck into it. So this is what I'm going to cover today. I'll provide a bit of a high-level background of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, the current status of where they are, which is not going very well, and then move into some concepts from systems thinking and modeling, basically, and then apply that framework back into perhaps we need to reconsider how we are structuring these goals and how we're measuring them and what we're doing. And then follow that up with a values framework that might be an alternative approach to consider the SDGs to be able to then do them a bit more justice than I think we're doing them at the moment. And really the whole idea over here is to focus on the concept of emergence. So emergence is a fundamental systems concept, and what we see around us is a result of things that connect and interact and emerge. And so that's really the focus of what I want to bring into the conversation. I also want to highlight that the words of Donella Meadows, who is a pioneer in systems thinking and modeling and simulation, systems dynamic modeling, who pointed out that, remember always that everything we know is just a model. We need to get our models out there so that others can see them, can interact with them, provide feedback, and in so doing, we improve the models of how we understand the world. And so with that, I want to sort of highlight the fact that what I'm saying in here today is a personal model. It's not the truth. It's just a perspective. And so take it that way. And I'd appreciate feedback as well of what you think or what your own thoughts might be when you see the concepts that I talk about. And I'm sure there'll be a bit of a learning to happen both ways when we do that. So with that, I want to start off with a bit of background on the SDGs. And some of you might know this already, but the Sustainable Development Goals weren't something that were just created from scratch to start with. It goes back to 1992, really to Agenda 21. So back in 1992, the UN looked at, what do we do that will help the planet? And they came up with this concept of Agenda 21 in Rio when they had the Earth Summit. And they monitored that every 5 years. So it would be Rio +5, Rio +10. So they had these summits where they would review the status of these goals that they came up with them. And what they found really was, in a similar fashion, those goals weren't really going too well. And so while these were going, then in 2000 there was another summit where they looked at maybe there's a different perspective we need to consider, and they came up with the 8 Millennium Development Goals. And the Millennium Development Goals were then monitored in a similar fashion to the to the Earth Summit Agenda Goals, the Agenda 21. And then they also weren't doing too well. And so then what happened was when they came together at Rio +20, so this is 20 years after the Agenda 21, which is the one that's showing up on the left-hand side over here. They thought we need to relook at this whole construct, and they brought together the Agenda 21 goals and the Millennium Goals and put them together, and they developed a new framework which they called essentially built on these two concepts of sustainability and development, but then brought it into fundamentally three perspectives: a social perspective, environmental perspective, and economic perspective, looking at people, the planet, and prosperity. And then while they were discussing this in the working groups, they thought, we should think about peace and partnership as well. And so these words came to form the 5 Ps. And the 5 Ps formed the basis then of what became framework for the UN SDGs. And that framework was then adopted in 2015 at the UN summit. And that's what we hear today and see today. It became the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we had 17 goals. And then to measure those goals, the working groups came up with 169 targets. And then for each of those targets, they had key performance indicators to be able to measure them. There were 230 key performance indicators. Now, as anyone can imagine, this is not a very simple task. And the more targets you have, the more KPIs you get, the more complex it gets. But that's the framework that they came up with. And there was also a relook at this to say, we didn't do too well when we had the summit, the original 2 summits and the Millennium Development Goals. So we need to do something differently as well. And that was that they wanted to build it up on these 4 principles, that they didn't want to think of these things as siloed initiatives. They needed to be applicable universally. They need to be inclusive, and no one should be left behind. That those were the 4 fundamental underpinning values. And out of that came essentially the goals that we all know today. No poverty, no zero hunger, health, and so on. And these are the goals that a lot of investment has gone in behind. There's a lot of push from the UN to do this. A lot of countries are collaborating, and they're doing what they can to make this happen. However, when the status was looked at in this year, when they reviewed the status, and it was done on the 2nd of May, the report was issued to the Secretary General of the UN. And you can do a search for this and you'll find the report. If you just do progress toward the SDGs report to Secretary General, you'll find it. And what that report showed is that it's not going very well again. Only 17 of the goals are on track. 18 or close to half of them, roughly 18 plus 80%, but 30% are showing some progress. And then a large proportion, over a third of them, really have either stalled or regressed. So they've gone backwards almost, and they're not doing too well. This is the status of the individual goals. Again, this is from this report, and you can look it up. So really, it's all over the place. There's some goals that are not even progressing at all. Some are regressing, and some have made some significant progress along the way, measured as per those KPIs and targets that they talked about. To give you an example, here's one of the goals, and I picked goal 7 because it's something that's happening everywhere today, is energy. The world is going through the zero carbon and trying to go down to this path of renewables. And so goal 7 was essentially the wording at the very top. It's ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. And how this is done is how they measured them. So that was the goal. And in the spreadsheet, and you can look at this, that's the link at the bottom to the spreadsheet. So you can download this and you can look at exactly what the data is in this spreadsheet as well. So it says, so this column over here is the target. So for example, we see that goal 7 is broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 targets. The first target is by 2030, ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, modern energy services. Then it talks about substantially improve the energy mix. and so on. So you look through the targets, and then each of those targets has a number of KPIs that are used to measure it. So, and then there's an agency that's assigned the responsibility within the UN to perform that measurement. And then there's a secondary agency. And then over here on the side, you see some notes from various review meetings that they've had in the past. Now, what I first observed when I saw this was that, so for example, the goal says ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable model energy. But if you look at the targets, there is a target about accessibility. There is a target, and the rest of the targets are all about sustainable and modern energy. There is nothing in those targets about affordable or reliable energy, which is strange. Now, I thought that, okay, we'll see what that does. And so what I want to do is quickly look at two of the targets. So also the first one, when I looked at that, we looked at the data that's in this spreadsheet. You find that it has data on 7.1.1. So, who has access to energy, but there's no data on the proportion of the population, primary reliance on clean energy, for example. So that's missing. And I don't know why that's the case. So if you look at that in more detail, and you can go and look at this again at the website that's listed at the bottom. And you can look at any country and you can look at the details. And I've just picked 3 countries over here. I picked Australia, India, and Bangladesh, just as I picked it out of just to see what it was like. And so this is the first goal. And just to be clear, so the goal is ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. Now, they broke that down into 2 targets. They say proportion of the population with access to electricity and proportion of the population with primary reliance. There is no data on 7.1.2 for some reason. It doesn't exist. But 7.1.1 says that, for example, in Australia, that 100% of the population has access to energy, which actually is not true. If you go outside of the middle, there are places where there isn't access to energy. They have to have their own generators. In India, it says now, India, everyone has access to energy. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but that's what is being reported. And in Bangladesh, it's very close to 100% now is what the goal is saying. So it makes you think about, are they measuring these things properly? Is there something that needs to be done to fix it? I then looked at just a quick example of 7B, which is all about infrastructure and upgrade technology, and it's about sustainability, about sustainable energy. And if you look at this one, again, you could look at the detail of it. Same 3 countries, just to show the trend. So the goal itself is expand the infrastructure and upgrade technology to supply modern. So the idea is renewables. We're moving from coal to renewables. That's the idea. Now, what's it? Oops, did someone say something, or that's just the recording? Okay, I'll keep going. So what we see over here is that some things are fairly obvious. So, for example, the per capita. It's in Australia per capita, and you see that's of the order of thousands. In India, it's of the wattage per capita is of the order of hundreds, and in Bangladesh, it's tens. So there's an order of magnitude different, but the curves look very similar in that regard. What's also interesting is that what they seem to be reporting on is primarily the renewables and hydro, and you can see that those are shown. For example, what's not shown is nuclear energy, for example, is not shown at all. And again, I guess that's because people are worried about nuclear and there's a reluctance to go down that path. And some of them don't have the different categories that are shown. But the trend seems to be going upwards, especially in the renewables, which is what they're looking for. And so if you look at this in that regard, what essentially comes out of it is that while the goal says energy needs to be accessible, affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern, there is nothing in the monitoring that's done that looks at the affordability of energy and the reliability of energy. And energy is probably one of the things that is getting the most expensive in the world today, in terms of our cost of living aspects. So just to sort of finish off on that's the current status of the UN SDGs. It's not going very well. If history repeats itself, within 2 or 3 years, they're going to probably throw all this away and come up with a new set of goals, because these aren't working just as they've done in the past. Now, that we don't want that to happen, because I think these are really relevant goals. I think the frameworks that they've established and how they're doing it is probably what the challenge is that we need to look at. So I want to now step into systems thinking and the concept of emergence. Now, all of we have oxygen and hydrogen. They're gases at normal temperature. And then something funny happens, right? When you bring these things together, and you take hydrogen and oxygen together, and you create the water molecule, and now we have wetness. And so the question is, where does this come from, right? What is this property that happens when you connect these two gases together to give you wetness? And that is fundamentally is the concept of emergence. Now, to give you another example of that, I'll use this, and I hope this video works. It's a very short video of a concept called murmuration. It's where birds fly together in formations, and you've probably seen this, but it's meditative. So it's quite amazing the shapes that form almost naturally, and no one's doing it, it's just happening. Here's another one, again, a very short video, and this one also is a similar concept, but quite interesting.
How do ants form the sort of cloudy entity that is a colony? By following a rule set that produces order through chaos. For example, let's look at how an ant colony distributes jobs. Let's assume that a colony should have 25% workers, 25% caretakers, 25% soldiers, and 25% gatherers. Ants communicate their current job via chemicals. For example, a worker ant constantly secretes chemicals that say, "I'm a worker." When ants meet other ants, they smell each other to gather information, telling each other their job and what they're doing. Both keep track of who they met in the past. Now, imagine an anteater kills most of the gatherers. If this isn't fixed quickly, the colony will starve. Many worker ants need to switch jobs, but how do you tell this to thousands of them? Simple, you don't. Our worker ant will still meet and smell other ants, but it will encounter almost no gatherers at all. It counts too few gatherers until it reaches a critical point, and then it changes its job. The worker becomes a gatherer. Other ants will do the same until after a while there are enough gatherers again. The balance is restored all by itself. The actions and interactions of an individual are random. You can't plan which ant will encounter which other ant, but the simple set of rules is so elegant that a colony's many operations emerge as a consequence.
And think about that when we do things, when we do things together, when in a family, for example, if there's a task to be done, sometimes you have to tell people, but usually when there's care in a team or a family, the tasks get done. People just jump in and do it naturally. No one has to go in there and make it happen. And that's the fundamental thing about emergence. It just happens. And the interesting thing is it can't actually be controlled if we do the wrong thing about it. So what is emergence? You get a number of definitions. The dictionary says it's something coming up, which is fairly basic. Wikipedia talks about a philosophy, and now it starts to think about systems theory, about science and arts, about things interacting and creating something that doesn't exist without from the parts themselves. The systems engineering body of knowledge talks about the principles that entities exhibit properties which are meaningful only when they're taken together, not by the individual parts. Nkosi's definition is building on that, and it talks about how a system is an arrangement of parts and elements that together exhibit behaviors and meaning that the individual parts do not. And those systems' properties emerge as a result of the interaction of the part. So my definition, a work in progress definition, is that I actually think that emergence is not just actually is the fundamental property of systems. It is what makes everything what it is. It explains a system's properties and behaviors. So for example, if a human system, we think about the properties of the system, the temperature, how your blood pressure, all of those things are your properties, and your behaviors, how you interact with people. Are you upset? Are you calm? Those sorts of things. And that is a balance between these external and internal and external forces that exist in our environment. And they result with interactions that happen internally and externally, and they result in intended and unintended outcomes that emerge from those interactions. So if I bring the systems thinking paradigm into this now and say what that is. So Peter Senge is a famous systems thinker. He talks about systems thinking as a conceptual framework, a body of knowledge, a set of tools that we've developed over time, that we've started to look at patterns, and we use those patterns to understand and make them clear. And we have models for those patterns. We have models called system archetypes. For example, I'm showing you two over here. There's plenty of them. So fixes that backfire. So fixes backfires. We need to do something quickly. We fix the symptom, but we don't fix the cause. And what happens is the symptom gets worse over time, and we have to do more. So, for example, farmers might use pesticides to control pests in their crops, and they continue to use the pesticide. After a while, the pests become strong, and through genetic modification, they are not affected by the pesticide, and you have to use more and more of the pesticide. It's any time when you have to apply something that you then have to keep coming back and do again. That happened with the COVID vaccinations that were done in the world. There is something fundamentally wrong in what they're doing when they have to do that, because you're not fixing the actual root cause of the problem. The second one on the right-hand side is where we do the same thing, but we actually know that there's an issue there, but we don't fix the issue and we delay the problem. So, for example, when we give food to people that are in famine and hunger, that takes away the problem temporarily. But if we just keep doing that and giving the food, we're not solving the real problem. And then what happens is, if we keep doing that, we get corruption happening around that. And now the corruption forms mafias and cartels, and it becomes even harder now to fix the problem that was there in the first place. And that's called shifting the burden. We're pushing the actual problem out in the future because we don't want to face it now, and we make it easy for us to do that. So my personal view is that systems thinking is a conceptual framework and a methodology. So an architecture and a methodology that helps us to understand and deal effectively with the world, and to make it a better place at the end of the day. And it's complemented fundamentally by modeling and simulation. It's how we understand the world and how we then can predict of how things are going to happen. But fundamentally, if we think about what we are trying to do to understand any system at the very highest level, it's to answer these three questions, right? What the system does, how it does it, and really to understand why it does it. And there is a very famous metaphor that helps us understand that I've used so many times, and I've really come to think is one of the most powerful metaphors there, and that's the metaphor of the iceberg. And so what the metaphor of the iceberg says is, we can just react to what's happening, to the what. And really, that's like looking at the symptom and just reacting to it, not doing anything. It has no meaning. If you really want to understand how a system is and how it behaves, you need to go below that surface of the iceberg and look for patterns, those system archetype type patterns. So we take data and we process it, and we look for models and patterns in that data. And now we can start to predict. We use those models to predict. So, for example, we have models that we use to predict the weather. Well, we base it on data, and we can say what's going to happen. And now we can anticipate, and we can make changes with some level of knowledge. But if you really want to understand it a bit more, we need to go below the surface and understand the structures that are driving the patterns that we're seeing, the architectures and the models for those architectures. And now we can design a change into the system to make it change what it's doing. But to really, truly, fundamentally understand a system, we need to transform it. We need to understand why. And that why is the mental models that are driving the architectures and are driving the patterns of behaviors that we're seeing at the surface. So these mental models are absolutely fundamental to understanding systems and transforming them. Now, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but there is so these mental models result in what we see in the environment, the things that we observe. But there's also a reflection of this in the environment. So there's a reflection of the iceberg construct above the environment that is influencing it down. So, for example, we have societal mental models. We have organizational structures that we work in. We have behavior patterns, cultures that form, that also drive behaviors from the top down. And what we find is that what we see happening in the world today is the coming together of these forces of strong emergence, which are societal mental models, the weak emergence, the individual mental models of how we do stuff and why we do it. And that becomes the change in the world of what happens. So, for example, look at the starlings again, and think of what you observed when they were doing that flying. And really, they were fundamentally, from an environmental perspective, they were, don't fly into your friends next to you, avoid the collisions. So internally, fly generally in the same direction, and don't go too far away from the group, because if that happens, there's a chance that you might get killed by a predator. In a similar fashion, the ants were stay focused on your task, follow others to the food, and keep track of the roles. And if there is a problem with the roles, then switch roles and help out where you need to help out. And we find very basic emergent outcomes that come out of this. The concept of separation, the concept of alignment, and the concept of cohesion. And these three fundamental principles are driving the behaviors that we're seeing and causing the emergence that's going on outside of that. And they're a mix of what's happening from the outside and what's happening from the inside. And so we need to understand, if we have to understand the world or systems, we need to recognize that there are these two forces that are happening. There are societal mental models that are driving behaviors, and there are individual mental models of individuals working within those societal constructs. And what are some of the societal behavior drivers we see today? Well, basic stuff: religions, beliefs, our heritage, our culture, the ethics and values that we possess. What are the norms in society today? Politics, friends and peer pressure. We want to fit into society. What about the individual mental models? These are our competencies, what we learn, the skills that we developed, being systemic and being systematic, about understanding architectures and frameworks within the works that we have to do, understanding the behaviors and the dynamics of what we work in, how we transform things, how we need to go across disciplines, and how we need to connect things together. And these are individual competencies that we bring in to create the world that around us. And from a systems engineering perspective, the top part is the societal stuff, is about building the right systems for society. And the bottom part is about building the systems right, is using the right competencies to be able to develop and build these systems that we build. And so the job that we have in the world, whatever we do, is fundamentally about understanding this construct and this framework, and recognize that working within it, so that we bring in the ability to maximize the right emergence while minimizing the wrong emergence. And in that sense, let's take an example. Anything that's been created in the world, any invention, comes from the environment. So there is a perceived need of something to be done, or where someone's having a problem, or there is a need to improve something. And individuals take that perceived need, and through their innovation, through their competencies, they come up with an innovation. They create a solution to that need. And that solution provides benefit. It provides reward. So that it goes out, and they get compensated by society in a way for that reward, and there's profit. Now what happens is, after we've done it, now there's a need to to improve that profit, to improve that reward. So we improve the way we produce this stuff. We start to mass produce. We start to improve the efficiency of how we're doing it. And by doing that, we go back, and there is more reward. Now there is growth. And can you see how that cycle then continues, and the system grows? And after a while, what we find is, where initially it was the innovation that was driving it, it quickly shifts to growth and profit that is driving what needs to happen. And that then changes the way things are done in the way it's done. Look at what's happening in the world. We have polluted our planet, and we've caused problems, and now we're trying to fix them. And the UN SDGs are looking at one of those things. And we hear a lot of the time about global warming and climate change. We've just been through a massive pandemic. And initially, people started reacting and getting innovation in to do it. But what happened after that, progressively, we started to see the impact of these things progressing down exactly the same path of these principles. Greed came in, and fear was used, and people started making money out of these things. And we forgot why we were doing it in the first place, and it got shifted over to be something that was driven essentially by growth and profit. And what we find in this stuff is that these societal norms that drive us, as individuals, we have to go back at the end of the day to our beliefs and our values to make this right. And to do that, we need to recognize, I think at the very top, that we need to be aware that this is happening, that this is the patterns that happen in society. We need to have the cognition. We need to have the courage to be able to deal with those issues when they go in the wrong direction. But we also need to have compassion that everyone is doing the best they can, because they're in a situation that they've got to support their families, they've got to live their lives and to be able to live. So they're doing the best they can in the context that they're in. And as individuals, we need to come in with the right competency and the capacity and the willingness to collaborate to make these things happen. And at the end of the day, our job, when we work in these spaces, is about making a better world and to apply systems approaches in doing that. So when we look at the SDGs now, and keep this context in the back of your mind as we just go through the SDGs, the concept of the iceberg. So first of all, it should be obvious that the SDGs are the what. They are the result of the outcomes. And if you look at all of them, none of them can happen independently. They're all interconnected. Clean water, sanitation, poverty, hunger, none of those can happen individually. And if you look at what are the systems that are driving these behavior, what are the patterns and systems that are driving it? Well, they're the underlying systems of society, political systems, economic systems, environmental systems, social systems, and how they're interacting. And these interactions are resulting in the outcomes that we're seeing. But is it just that that's doing it? All of those interactions are driven by humans. There is an individual or a person behind all of this, notwithstanding the fact that machine learning and artificial intelligence is coming in, which is another subject that probably we can talk on, but not today. But that's the idea, is the human. And so the question really is, what are the beliefs and desires that humans have that are causing the transformations that are happening, and not the ones that we would like to see happen, that is resulting in the world in the challenges that we see. And so if we are to deal with the UN SDGs and actually deliver a world that is a better place, we need to first of all tackle the underlying systems and understand them and their interactions. But fundamentally, we need to understand humans and how humans will then create the values and propositions that result in those outcomes. So this is really a call to action of systemic leadership, to holistically engineer, to use our competencies that understand and underpin the desires of all of life that exists on the planet to create what we want, and to be able to deal with a strong emergence that pushes up the wrong way. The current paradigm, the only paradigm that exists in the world today, is that of growth. It's unending growth that's driven by targets and KPIs that are driven by profits behind them. They lack consideration of human needs. There is no consideration given of how the human value is built into profits or growth, unless individuals and organizations do that. And there are siloed constructs. So each of those KPIs, if you look at the SDGs that they've got, while they said that they would like to keep them integrated, if you actually look at the KPIs, they're all individual. I haven't seen any KPIs that actually go across and connect them together in that regard. And so what we find in this space is that we really need to understand what is it that humans need to do, or what is it that humans do that drives the behaviors. And this is one example of what someone who did that. You might not have heard him, or you might have. Max Neef was an economist in Chile, who studied in the US. He studied at Harvard, and he, was very highly qualified. And he says he went back to Chile and he became an economist over there. And he says, he tells a story of, he was in a village one day after they had a storm and there was a lot of damage, and the villagers had lost their houses, and he was standing in the mud and the water talking to a villager. And he said, my 10 years of economics studies at the highest universities, I didn't have the words to be able to communicate how to help this individual with what he needed at that time. And he also talks about what happened in the global financial crisis in 2008. He said in 2008, he knew at that time that to solve the problem of hunger in the world, there was a certain amount of money that was needed, but no one had that money. And then we had the GFC, and all of a sudden there was enough money to bail out these organizations that had caused the GFC. $17 trillion was found to bail out these organizations. And he said, if we had that money, we could have taken the world out of hunger for 600 years. The whole planet would never be hungry for 600 years. That's how much money was put into to bail out the people in the GFC. And he said, if this is not a scandal, then I don't know what could be a scandal. And that motivated him to change his opinion and view of economics. And he ended up drafting a new theory of economics, which he called barefoot economics. And this book of his describes that. And underpinning that economics was this set of values that he came up with, and he called it his model of human scale development. So he came up with the model, and he said, this is the model of this is what drives humans. We need subsistence, we need protection, we need affection, we need understanding, we need purpose and participation, we need time to recreate and do selves. We need to create identity and freedom. And he had these 9 values, and he said, this is what really economics should be all about. And he underpin that with 5 principles and 1 fundamental value. So if we model a human with these perspectives, and we think, and his principles were: 1, the economy should serve the people, not the other way around. It's not about the economy, it's the people that are important. Number 2, development has to do with people and not with objects. It's people that need to develop. And development is not the same as growth. And he points out how development, it does not necessarily require growth. And another person that I sort of admire is Russell Ackoff, and he pointed out that the difference between development and growth is asymmetry grows, humans develop. And he went on to say that no economy is possible in the absence of ecosystem services. Everything is in an ecosystem, and we need to think about the ecosystem and model that. And the economy itself is a subsystem of a larger finite system, our planet, and therefore permanent growth is impossible. We cannot continue to grow forever, and we have to stop it at some point. And at the end of the day, the fundamental principle is that no economic interest whatsoever under any circumstances can be above the reverence and miracle of life itself in all its manifestations. So it's not about humans, it's all life on the planet. And so if you put that framework and I overlay it on the societal norms, which is the top part, and then the individual norms, we start to hopefully see that there is a possible framework forming that will help us transform. So at the top, from a societal perspective, it's about those 5 principles. At the bottom, it's about the human and what are the things that a human values. And then underpinning all of that is this one fundamental check that we need to do, that no economic interest whatsoever under any circumstances must essentially conflict with the miracle that life is itself. And so if you look at that perspective and we look at how the SDGs have been managed, they've essentially come from the perspective of fundamentally the frameworks of growth that currently exist. All of the KPIs, all of the targets, they use the current societal norms of growth. They use targets and KPIs that measure those things. And it's largely a top-down approach. The construct of the targets themselves are very much bottom-up, and they go the way they do. And so what we need is a systemic paradigm shift of that model of how we are doing this stuff and how we manage it. We need to change the environmental context from growth to development. And we need to think about underpinning the bottom-up by human needs. And to make that happen. So with that, getting close to the end of it. So essentially how we map these frameworks into how we deal with the world today, about having the cognition, the courage, and the compassion by applying these 5 principles, about having the competency, capacity, and collaboration, but thinking about the human element in it, and everything that we model must be based on the human element. And at the end of the day, recognizing that if we are going to make a change from growth to development, we have to take back control, and the control lies with individual human. It's the human that makes the difference. And that means that we have to give humans those 5 principles of participation, those 9 principles at the bottom, and we must ensure the economy works in that way. And to finish off with, I really think that systems thinking, modeling, and simulation are absolutely the fundamental capabilities we need in the world today. We actually understand the world and we are able to make a change. And in that regard, this is just a personal perspective. As I said, I believe, we're the custodians of our past, we're the creators of our present, and the guardians of our future. So with that, I shall stop. I don't know did I go over time too far, but I might stop over there and maybe hand back to you, Rupali, or whoever else wants to take over. Thank you. Let's stop sharing. I can't hear you, Rupali. I think you're on mute. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. And now I would like to request all the panel members as well as participants to please ask their queries if they have. You may write your questions in the chat box as well.
I think it's towards the end of the year. Everyone wants to have a holiday now. I'd be curious if anyone else has come across Maxwell Naif's framework and any of your modeling, if you've actually employed these frameworks at all.
Anyone from the panel members? Yes, sir. Please, Vinod, sir.
To his immediate question, JB, I have not come across Manfred Max Neef. I've written it down and I'm going to study it. No, I've not heard about him. I will study more about what you have said. Thank you for telling us about him. That focus on the human being and not on objects, and also on development, but not growth. I think those are important points that you made. You also mentioned Okay, no, more than that, I would like to think about what system is. A system is a collection of parts which serves uh, a certain objective that each of those parts cannot do alone, and they come together so that they can solve a problem that is larger than the individuals or the society that make up the system. That's how I would like to look at. Some questions for you, JB, from my side. One
Sure.
is which country is doing well with respect to the SDGs?
That,
Which
that's
area?
that's actually really hard to tell because believe it or not, they give you can go to the site, the links are in the thing. You go to the site and you can look at the overall result, or you can look at individual country results. So really to find that out, you have to go down to select each country, go and look at the goal that you want to look at and tell you what they're doing. But if you look at, for example, energy, which is what I looked at a bit more than others, I mean, clearly the first world countries are doing, based on what is being measured, they're doing an amazing job. Now, having said that, in Australia, energy prices have quadrupled within the last 3 years, right? It's just gone through the roof. It's getting the most expensive there is. We are having problems with the grid. Places, the city of Adelaide lost power for a long period of time. Critical infrastructure was missing power. So it's not working. What's happening is not working. The cost is going up. And I think part of it is being driven by the fact that they are looking primarily at changing the energy systems into completely renewables in a system that's really complex. And I think it needs to be done in a stepwise fashion. You can't just suddenly do a step change and think the whole thing is going to work okay. And I think that's what we're facing. The symptoms are there. So yeah. Also, that I'm curious. The results say that in India, for example, in Bangladesh, 100% access to energy. Is that a valid statement, you think, or is it what does that mean? Do people always have power 100% of the time, all the time, or do we have power failures? Are there times when power is not available? And so I think there's challenges in that space.
Well, the good side is that India has been putting up a lot of, or has been focusing on solar power generation in a very big way. There are huge targets, but I think along with China, India and China are probably putting the largest number of coal-fired plants. I think the data is there somewhere. I think we're doing something like 50, 60 of them.
Right.
That brings me back to a major question.
Let's get serious. Yeah.
Why are we doing this? I'm not talking about the country law. I'm talking about the people. Are not the people informed enough? I'm not talking about education.
I'll give you a
They
personal.
cannot,
Yep.
in terms of, don't they live for 10 years into the future? Are they looking at 2 months ahead of time and not 10 years? Do they have a very short perspective of their future? A future means 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line means for their next generation.
Yes.
Which
Yep.
means I'm making a statement or not, or rather I'm not making a statement. I'm almost accusing this generation of not having enough concern for the next.
It's that shifting the burden system archetype, that's classically what's happening. But part of the reason, and this is a personal view, not any, don't associate anyone, just a personal view. I think what I'm seeing happening is that strong emergence, the societal norms are pushing things a certain way, and people are following along because it's hard to go against what society is saying at times. And even when you might see that what is happening is wrong, you may not speak up because you might feel bad about that because you could hurt someone's feelings, or the team is not doing that, or society is not doing that, or my friends are not doing it, and you continue down the path, right? It's the frog in the water, right? You raise the temperature slowly, and the frog stays there until eventually it gets cooked. And the sad part is that's why I think it has to be individuals have to start to speak up, right? To have the courage to be able to speak up, and we need to give them the courage to be able to speak up. And that's why I think freedom of speech is absolutely fundamental, right? And there was, for example, there was an attempt locally over here to pass a law that for this mis and disinformation stuff. And personally, I find that really strange, right? That's the one thing that allows people to communicate and express opinions, and it's through diversity of opinions that we come up with new ways of doing things. That innovation comes because of differing opinions, not because we continue to do the same thing all the time. Right. So I think that's absolutely fundamental, right? Freedom of speech is absolutely fundamental. The ability for individuals to be creative, to contribute, comes from that individual creativity and individual powers. And we need to foster that and keep that growing.
In
And be
fact, that's
cognizant.
what, I'm sorry, cut you off. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, that's all. I was going to say that's part of the cognizance, is being aware of that and being courageous that I might not have all the answers. Someone else might have a better way of doing things, and to be open to that and to be able to discuss it openly so that we can grow and beyond that. And the problem is we're not doing that because of those societal norms in the main, politics, the cultures, the things that are being driven. But primarily it's money and politics, right? That's what's driving it. My
So
perspective. Sorry, go on. We know what you're gonna say.
no,
Yeah.
no, that's okay. That means the examples that you gave us of the ants moving together or the starlings in murmuration, that is what we ought not to do. We need to break away from the murmuration groups. We need not to be following the anthill norms of doing all things together. We should break away.
I think you have to have the courage to step back from the narrative, to be able to speak what you believe to be true. That's the fundamental thing, and have the freedom to and have the courage and the freedom to be able to do that, and to have compassion and collaborative approaches. So, for example, the ants. No one tells the ant to change their roles. They do it themselves, right? And that's the point, is when people have the ability to have their own control of their own purpose and their own agency, and they have the right ethical frameworks and values, they will make the right choices and they will adjust. No one needs to tell them to come in and do the job. It's when the framework becomes constraining and says, this is the job that you do and you keep doing this, and I'm going to measure your KPI on how well you do this, but not how, if you do this other job. So why would they do another job? Because their KPI is based on doing this job, right? And if you think of that in the ant construct, what if the worker ant was only given rewards for doing the work? What the soldier ant was only given a reward for doing the fighting? Why would the soldier ant change its role to do a worker's job? Because it's going to lose, right? Because it won't get any reward if it changes roles. And that's what we're doing, right? We're having KPIs and targets for one particular thing, which means that's all that gets rewarded. What do companies do, right? Shareholder value and to increase their profits and growth. That's the only thing that's driving it, right? Everything needs to follow behind that. So the challenge, I think, and I don't have the answer for this, right? But the challenge is, how do we shift from a mindset of growth to a mindset of development? Even in the paradigms we talk about, people talk about a growth mindset. And it's good intentions, but the concept of growth is unending, and it's not sustainable. Development is sustainable and is unending. We never stop developing. Our minds continue to grow. We continue to learn. But how do we shift that, right? How do we shift societal norms to go from growth to development? That to me is the biggest challenge. And that if we can overcome that challenge, we'll save our world, our planet, and society. If we don't, we are doomed, I think, for failure.
So that means we are back to incentives and penalties. Attached to
I get concerned about that, because I think the incentives and penalties need to be based on the human development framework. That's the point I was trying to make, right? So it's not just about incentives being incentives from a monetary perspective, but incentives being across those 9 values of human values. Incentives to be able to create.
Therefore, we have got to come back to education, which is SDG number 4.
What's the remind me what 4 is? I'll go and find it. Let me see. Yep.
SDG number 4, education, is probably the key to the 16 other SDGs.
Yes, you're very right.
If people rise and say, I want this because it benefits the next generation as well, I would like to have a cleaner air. Right now, I'm sitting in Delhi, where the AQI is probably between 400 and 500,
Oh,
and it's been there for the last 1 or 2 months. It's going to be there for a few days as well. And this is happening every year. We are probably number one, not in the country, but in the world.
wow,
Probably
yeah.
something like what Beijing used to have many years back, and Tokyo also used to have many years back. I suspect they have recovered, they have repaired themselves, but we have not been able to do so because of one or two conditions, so partially legal as well.
Right.
But the point is, it is to do with education, information. If people are
You're
informed.
absolutely right. That's the foundation. That's the foundation. We know that. I agree with you. I think education is the foundation, and then we should have the ability to apply that knowledge so that we can turn it into wisdom, right? So that we can actually make wise decisions. Because knowledge by itself is just knowing how, but wisdom is knowing why, right? And that's the bit that really becomes important in this regard. Yeah.
If you stop a man in the street, or even a professor or a teacher like me somewhere, generally on an average, if you ask them, have you heard about SDG?
Mm,
The answer would surprise and perhaps
yes.
pain us as well. You say, what's that? Which means we have to start teaching SDGs in class 4 by the time is age 8 or 10.
Yeah.
Start telling about something about it.
Yes. I think also, just getting aware of how the SDGs are measured, I think is fundamental. Because if you go and look at how they've architected the targets and the KPIs, that's the place to start, right? To go back and apply a systems framework there and then change that, because I don't think what they've done there is right. Like I said, for example, the energy, in the goal it says affordable, accessible, affordable, reliable, and energy, but nowhere in the measurements in the targets does it measure affordability or does it measure reliability. They don't measure it, and if you don't measure it, then no one's going to know, right? And so I think we need to go back to, and I think I was just looking at the questions. Dr. Hirmat had a question about, do you think the systems thinking will resolve SDGs by human centric? I think the SDGs, as I said, they're a result. They're what we see as an outcome. But what I'm seeing is that the framework that delivers that outcome is flawed. It's not human centric. And I'm thinking that's what we need to change, that we need to change that framework so that at the bottom up, it's actually produces the results we want to see at the top. And that change is going to be a very hard one to make. And that's the paradigm shift. It's a fundamental paradigm shift from growth to development, bringing human values in. But it has to happen if we are to save our planet and sustain our future. So I think it'll be interesting times ahead, and I think it will not happen by one person giving the answer. It'll happen because we collaborate and someone comes up with ideas that others will then see, and then we'll collectively do it. So, for example, Max Knife's framework. I had never heard of it too, until I sat in another talk and someone from Mongolia was talking about what they were doing in Mongolia, and creating a concept, looking at the law that was there. And I heard about this guy, and then I looked at him, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, and then there's the one I talk about a lot, Umberto Maturana from Chile as well, a similar sort of guy who talks about the biology and how those things happen and how we as humans interact with each other to create these outcomes. So there's lots to be learned from all of our collective, consciousness in that regard. And India has got the biggest heritage there is, right? I mean, history goes back so far, and we see things that we can't even understand or explain today that came from years ago. And so I think the possibilities are huge if we allow them to happen, allow them to grow, allow human values to develop and not fall into something which becomes a control construct where people can't think except for doing the KPIs that they've got to meet, and that's all they do. That's the thing. Any other models? Anyone else got seen any other models or any other perspectives on the UN SDGs that you've come across, in your own work? I'm trying to see who's on here. I know Elizabeth couldn't make it. Oh, there's Dr. Nanako Iwasa is here too. My goodness, good to see you. Have you got any questions, Narako?
Hello, JB.
Hi, how are you? Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentations, and I am very, very impressed to listen to your presentation because
Thank you.
I remember you have wrote about the AI, to develop
Previously.
new models. But then I'm very interested in why you are focusing on SDGs now to create a new systematic models because I am wondering, now is a very, very popular. AI is very popular in Japan. So, and people try to use AI. But then listening to your presentation and each SDG goals might be used by using AI to support how to think, how to rethink to have the better solution. So I'm wondering to make a new systematic models, how can you use, how you try to use AI?
I think AI is going to be both a massive benefit and a very serious concern. Yeah, it's the huge benefit is that AI can do things. We can get machine learning and artificial intelligence to do things so much faster, right, at scale. All the things that are dull, dirty, or dangerous, right? Those types of tasks that we don't want humans to have to do, or because humans would take a long time to do it. Repeated stuff. That's where AI is great. The challenge comes with machine learning and artificial intelligence is the so sorry, I'll step back. Humans fundamentally do things that are quite unique. And if you very simplistic analogy here is there are two fundamental types of reasoning that humans can do, whereas I think AI and machine learning is limited to one of those two types. And those two types of reasoning are, I heard the term, it was inductive reasoning and abductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning is where you are extrapolating a model within a particular scope that you already have. And you are predicting that this based on the data that and the model that I have. I don't have data for this part, but it follows a particular equation. It might be a straight line or a parabola. So I can put that on there and say that I know that based on this model, this is what will happen at this particular point, and I can predict it. So it's inductive. Abductive reasoning is when is the thing that humans do so well, but machines, I cannot see machines doing it. In fact, I would say we don't want machines to do abductive reasoning, is where you apply a concept that is in one space into a completely different context. And you apply that because you not just have the knowledge, but you have the wisdom, right? That's the difference. And the concept that this has come to be applied in the machine learning construct for this, but I don't know if they understand the depth behind this, is the concept of hallucination. So we call it that the model is hallucinating. What's happening is the model is being applied in a category of things that it shouldn't be applied to, and it's coming up with stuff that doesn't make sense. And we are believing it, right? And that's what a hallucination is. It's putting a model to do something that's abductive when it should be limited to doing inductive reasoning fundamentally. So I completely agree with what you're suggesting, Narako, there, that we can use it to help us to do tasks, but I can't see it replacing the human cognition and the consciousness, which is really what we have, of being aware, of being abductive in our reasoning, and to be able to see that and correct things. Yeah, I'm not saying that humans do that correct as well. Yeah, so we make mistakes too, but at least, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. And so HI, and I trust on HI, human intelligence, more than AI. Yeah, thank you so much. And so especially, sorry, I'm asking you many questions. So I felt something organic, systematic models in your presentation. So, and I used a Seki model before. So, and Ikujiro Nonaka recently wrote the book, Management by the Wild, using Seki model. He used Seki model to develop a new community in Thailand. So, and so such an process of the practice, he found phonetic leadership. So this leadership is just like you are going to say now. So
Right.
this is an optional information. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
all.
No, that's
Thank you
that's
so
great.
much.
I'd love to hear some more of that, Donako. Maybe if you can send me something. That's fascinating. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've maybe Rupali, I'll hand back to you. I think we've gone out of time, right? So
Yes, sir. So thank you so much, Mr. Bhalla, for the enlightening and thought-provoking session on this very interesting topic, and we appreciate your valuable insights. And now I would like to invite Dr. Jigasu Dubey, Coordinator of Center of Excellence in Simulation and Gaming, to deliver the words of thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My sincere gratitude to Mr. Jawahar Bhalla for accepting our invitation to conduct this 65th webinar of the series, Pratiti Becoming Aware. Thank you very much, Jawaharji, for an interesting presentation. We are also thankful to the ISAGA for their collaboration. We express our sincere gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Upinder Dhar, and Rector, Dr. Santosh Dhar, for their continuous guidance and encouragement. Our sincere thanks to the panelists, Dr. Nanko and Dr. Vinod. We are also thankful to all the participants who are attending. And I am also thankful to Dr. Rupali Bharti, all the members of Center of Simulation and Gaming, and IT team of the university for their kind support. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jawaharji, for your participation. Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Ray. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you,
All the
sir.
best, everyone.
Once again, thank you for all panel members and participants to join in this today's webinar. And we hope you found this session enriching. And I would like to request all the participants to please fill the feedback form as in the chat box. So stay tuned for more exciting webinars on gaming and simulation by our renowned experts in the Pratiti 2024 series. Have a great day. Thank you.
No, Pratiti 2025.
Okay, that will be
Yes.
from the next month.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you. See you too. See you. See you. Bye bye now.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.